Greg's Story, Chapter 10. Greg pushed through the throngs of people flourishing, bustling around Amsterdam. Sweaty, a little frigid, with surges of butterflies churning his stomach into a bit of an unsettled mess, scourged any hope of looking put together. What a way to turn up at a wild goose chase for a girl his heart had conjured feelings for, but it was take it or leave it. The entire trip, Greg had gradually become more of a wreck. But he would embrace the dishevelment of his appearance and dive right into the organized chaos of a big city airport to discover the exact whereabouts of this Arizonian woman, Jessica, because frankly he liked her, and for all he knew she would only remain within the country's boundaries for an hour more. A layover could last what seems a lifetime or pass by in a blink of an eye. Time was of the essence, and he had to find her. Exhausted, Greg navigated his way from the station and into the entrance of the airport. He clasped his satchel tightly, hoping nothing would fall out and that he would somehow discover Jessica at any moment. Would she be happy to see him? Judging by the fact that she had waited in the hospital for 4 consecutive days to see him wake from his coma, his assumption was that she would be happy. There was an ever-present bleakness that huddled in the back of his mind, though, and shot little arrows at his excitement. Anxiety, maybe. He ignored it to the best of his ability. Jessica's doughy cheeks, dimpled and rosy, and her simple small smile burned in his mind alongside the image from the reoccurring dream he had had a few weeks before, which had featured a necklace bearing the emblem of Arizona State University. It had dangled seemingly random in a fog of gold, green, and beige. But judging from the past few weeks, the strange happenings from meeting Jessica, the kiss they had shared, the fact that she was from Arizona and had attended Arizona State, a life-threatening car accident that had tied them together and almost claimed his life, and a list of other unmistakably prominent factors, that dream, that dangling necklace thing, could be anything but random. Without a clue to what he was doing exactly, Greg maneuvered into the depths of the airport, steering the journey to its next point while lacking the complete picture or idea of his destination. Greg had hoped that he would find Jessica. He even felt himself praying a little inside. Unbeknownst to him, Jessica was more than nearby. She crept closely behind by way of her mind's eye. In reality, her eyes were closed, shielding her brown eyes as she sat in the stall of the women's bathroom. Locked into a private place, she was able to watch him. The energy within her scoped the vicinity of the airport. Little exertion was expunged in the search because of those days in the hospital. She had had time to familiarize herself with Greg and his essence. Greg felt density in the air, and he stopped for a moment to catch his breath. His nerves were getting out of hand. There was a potency tickling his fingertips, and he scratched at his skin in an effort to eradicate the itching that emanated along his body. There wasn't exactly a sure way to explain the presence, the sensation that he felt. He tried to ignore it and press on with his search, but as more time continued, the more susceptible he became to the itching. He grumbled in agitation. It became unbearable as Greg passed a few shops and reached the bathrooms. He stopped, swallowed hard, and was about to possibly collapse when it abruptly quit. He could feel nothing but the drip of perspiration sliding down his face and back. The hubbub of the airport was tuned out as Greg focused on his lungs, grasping for recovery. He closed his eyes and faced the hollow emptiness that suddenly stood in his wake. Leaning against the wall, he soaked up the stability and firmness of it. The cold surface was welcoming, and he pressed his head against it. I may look like an idiot right now, or a lunatic, but it doesn't matter, Greg thought to himself. Sticky, euphoric, and irritated, Greg remained perched in such a state for a few minutes. The coldest hand suddenly touched Greg's back. Startled, he shuddered and turned about instantly. His own green eyes came into full contact with the brown ones attached to the girl he had been looking for. Jessica, arms outstretched, smiled at him as she stood there. What on earth? Greg's voice was hoarse as if he had scratched his throat repeatedly for the last 10 minutes. Jessica's face was almost entirely innocent, but an underlying something was present. Greg couldn't put his finger on it, but it was familiar. She took his hand in hers, and a cool rushing swept down his spine and his ears, down his throat, into his lungs, bubbling up the butterflies in his stomach, easing the miniature inferno he'd just experienced and abolishing the empty abyss that followed it. It worked. Jessica's voice was different when she said that. Her voice was different.